I was debugging code at my downtown Portland office when my phone buzzed with a call from my parents. "Bartholomew, we have wonderful news," my mother Patricia announced cheerfully. "We spent 92% of your savings to buy Amanda a beautiful house as her wedding gift." Before I could process this bombshell, my sister grabbed the phone. "You don't have a single penny left, loser brother," Amanda mocked with obvious glee in her voice. That's when I burst out laughing, because they had absolutely no idea that those savings were just my decoy account, filled with worthless money from cryptocurrency losses I deliberately created to fool them. Growing up in Portland, Oregon, I learned early that my parents Robert and Patricia viewed me differently than my younger sister Amanda. While I earned scholarships and worked part-time jobs throughout high school, Amanda received everything handed to her on a silver platter. The pattern continued into our 20s, but 3 years ago, I discovered something that changed everything. My cousin Frank worked as a teller at First National Bank downtown, the same branch where I kept my checking account. During a family barbecue, Frank had too many beers and confessed that my parents regularly asked him to check my account balances. They were paying him $50 each time to provide unofficial statements, claiming they just wanted to keep track of how their son was doing financially. That revelation hit me like a punch to the stomach. My own parents were essentially spying on my finances, treating my hard-earned money as their personal emergency fund. I realized they weren't proud of my success as a software engineer. They were calculating how much they could eventually take when the right opportunity presented itself. So, I developed a strategy that would protect my real wealth while satisfying their curiosity. I opened a separate savings account at the same bank, one that Frank could easily access for my parents' snooping sessions. Into this decoy account, I deposited modest amounts from each paycheck, creating the illusion of a young professional slowly building his nest egg. Meanwhile, I funneled my actual earnings into 3 different LLCs that I established for my freelance software consulting business. My real money went into investment accounts, real estate purchases, and cryptocurrency trading under business names that had no obvious connection to my personal identity. The beautiful irony was that while my parents thought they were monitoring a struggling son saving pennies, I was actually building substantial wealth completely off their radar. The fake savings account served another purpose beyond deception. I deliberately deposited money from cryptocurrency trades that had gone bad, essentially using it as a dumping ground for my investment losses. When Bitcoin crashed last year, I sold my holdings at a 30% loss and deposited the remaining funds into the decoy account. My parents would see the deposits and assume I was successfully saving money, never realizing they were actually watching me document my financial failures. For 3 years, I maintained this elaborate facade. I drove a 7-year-old Honda Civic instead of the BMW I could afford. I rented a modest 1-bedroom apartment in southeast Portland, rather than buying the downtown condo I'd been eyeing. When family members asked about my finances, I would shrug and mention trying to save a little each month, while my real portfolio grew exponentially. The phone call from my parents should have devastated me, but instead it triggered a satisfaction I'd been anticipating for years. They had finally revealed their true intentions, and I had documented evidence of their betrayal. More importantly, they had just stolen money that represented my worst investment decisions, not my actual wealth. But Amanda's mocking tone suggested this went deeper than simple parental favoritism. Her confidence and cruelty indicated she knew about their plan beforehand. As I sat in my office chair, still chuckling at the beautiful irony, I realized this wasn't an impulsive decision by my parents. This was a calculated theft that my sister had probably orchestrated. "Bartholomew, are you listening?" My mother's voice cut through my thoughts. "We said Amanda needs this house for her future with Derek. You can always make more money, but she needs stability now." The casual dismissal of my financial security in favor of my sister's comfort confirmed everything I'd suspected about my family's priorities. They weren't just taking my money. They were justifying it with twisted logic that made me the selfish one for not voluntarily funding Amanda's lifestyle. 20 minutes later, I pulled my Honda into my parents' driveway in the Woodstock neighborhood, maintaining my carefully constructed image as their modestly successful son. Robert answered the door wearing his favorite Portland Trail Blazers jersey, treating this like any normal family visit, rather than acknowledging he'd just committed financial theft. Come in," he said warmly, leading me to their cluttered living room where Patricia sat surrounded by mortgage documents and real estate paperwork. "We know you might be a little surprised, but once you see the house we bought for Amanda, you'll understand why this was such a smart investment." I settled into their worn leather recliner, the same spot where I'd announced my college graduation and my first job promotion. The familiar surroundings made their betrayal feel even more surreal. These were the people who taught me right from wrong, who lectured me about responsibility and integrity throughout my childhood. "Let me show you the paperwork," Patricia said, shuffling through a stack of documents with obvious pride. "The house is in Beaverton. 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, beautiful kitchen with granite counters. The mortgage company required 20% down, which came to exactly $87,000 from your savings account." My blood pressure spiked as the numbers sank in. They hadn't just taken some money for a modest gift. They'd calculated the exact amount needed for a substantial down payment on an expensive house, then drained my account to meet that specific figure. "How did you access my account?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Robert shifted uncomfortably, avoiding eye contact. "Frank helped us with the paperwork. He said the bank could transfer funds between family members for legitimate purposes. We figured you'd want to help your sister get started in life." The lies were piling up faster than I could process them. Banks don't allow random family members to access accounts without proper authorization. Frank had committed fraud, and my parents had knowingly participated in it. They were trying to reframe theft as legitimate banking procedures. Patricia continued explaining their justification, while showing me photographs of Amanda's new house. "We've been watching your account grow for the past 2 years, and we knew you were doing well with your computer job. Amanda and Derek need this house now before the wedding, but you have plenty of time to save again." 2 years. They'd been monitoring my finances and planning this theft for 24 months, timing it perfectly to coincide with Amanda's wedding preparations. This wasn't a spontaneous decision based on sudden opportunity. This was a long-term conspiracy. "Where's Amanda now?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. "She's at the new house with Derek measuring rooms for furniture," Robert answered proudly. "They're so excited about starting their married life in a real home instead of some cramped apartment." Just then, the front door burst open, and Amanda walked in, carrying shopping bags from expensive furniture stores. Behind her came Derek, a tall guy with perfectly styled hair and an attitude that screamed entitlement. I'd met him several times at family gatherings, and he always struck me as someone who thought the world owed him everything he wanted. Well, if it isn't my generous big brother," Amanda announced with a smirk that made my stomach turn. "Did Mom and Dad show you pictures of my beautiful new house? The one you bought me?" Derek laughed and slapped me on the shoulder like we were old friends. "Thanks, man. That house is going to be perfect for what we have planned. 4 bedrooms gives us plenty of room to grow, if you know what I mean." Amanda's expression shifted to something even more cruel. "Oh, Derek. He doesn't know the best part yet." She turned to face me directly, her eyes gleaming with malicious joy. "We're pregnant, Bartholomew. Your little nephew or niece is going to grow up in the house you bought." The room erupted in celebrations as my parents jumped up to hug Amanda and Derek. Patricia started crying happy tears, while Robert pumped Derek's hand like they'd just closed a major business deal. Nobody seemed to notice that I hadn't congratulated them or shown any excitement about becoming an uncle. Derek wrapped his arm around Amanda possessively and looked directly at me. "Your sister told me all about your savings account months ago. I've been encouraging her to talk to your parents about getting some family support for our future. It's not like you have a wife or kids to spend money on, right?" The calculated nature of their betrayal was becoming crystal clear. This wasn't my parents spontaneously deciding to help Amanda. This was Derek and Amanda identifying me as a source of funding then manipulating my parents into stealing the money for them. They'd been planning this pregnancy announcement as emotional leverage to justify the theft. Amanda sat down across from me, still glowing with vindictive satisfaction. Derek and I have been talking about our financial future, and we realized that family members should support each other. You make good money with your computer programming, and we're just starting out. It only makes sense that you'd want to invest in our happiness. The twisted logic was breathtaking. They'd transformed theft into investment betrayal, into family support, and my financial security into their entitlement. Worse yet, my parents were nodding along with every word, completely buying into the narrative that I should be grateful for the opportunity to fund their lifestyle. As I sat there processing the magnitude of their deception, Patricia brought out a photo album filled with pictures of Amanda's shopping expeditions over the past year. Wedding dress fittings, catering appointments, honeymoon planning sessions, all funded by smaller withdrawals from my decoy account that I'd never noticed. We've been helping Amanda prepare for her wedding gradually. Patricia explained, turning pages filled with receipts and photographs. Her dress cost $4,000. The reception venue required a $6,000 deposit, and Derek's engagement ring was another $3,000. We knew you'd want her special day to be perfect. My hands trembled as I flipped through documented evidence of years' worth of theft. They'd been treating my savings account like their personal credit card funding, everything from Amanda's bachelorette party in Las Vegas to Derek's bachelor weekend in Seattle. The total amount stolen over 2 years was approaching $100,000. You took money for Derek's ring? I asked, unable to hide my incredulity. Derek held up his left hand, showing off a gold band that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Your sister wanted me to have something nice, and your parents agreed that family should invest in family. Besides, this ring represents our commitment to each other and our future children. Amanda leaned forward, her voice dripping with false sweetness. I've been keeping track of your account balance during my visits to your apartment, Bartholomew. You always leave bank statements on your kitchen counter, and I noticed you were doing really well financially. It seemed selfish to hoard all that money when Derek and I needed help starting our life together. The admission hit me like a physical blow. During family dinners and holiday visits to my apartment, Amanda had been secretly photographing my financial documents and reporting back to our parents. She'd been conducting surveillance on my finances, building detailed records of my account growth to plan their theft strategy. I have spreadsheets. She continued proudly, pulling out her phone to show me screenshots of my account balances over time. I've been tracking your income and spending patterns for 18 months. You live so modestly that I knew you weren't actually using most of your money. It was just sitting there doing nothing. Derek nodded approvingly at his fiancé's thoroughness. Amanda's really good with numbers and planning. She showed me how much money you had saved, and we realized you could easily afford to help us without affecting your lifestyle. You don't have a girlfriend or expensive hobbies. So what else would you spend it on? The casual way they discussed their surveillance and theft made my skin crawl. They'd turned financial stalking into responsible planning, made my frugal lifestyle into evidence that I didn't deserve my own money. In their minds, my lack of flashy spending meant I was selfish for not sharing my wealth with family members who would use it more appropriately. Suddenly, the front door opened again, and Frank stumbled in without knocking. My cousin looked terrible, with dark circles under his eyes and trembling hands that suggested he hadn't slept in days. His bank uniform was wrinkled and stained, and he kept looking over his shoulder like someone might be following him. "Robert, Patricia, we have a problem," Frank announced without greeting anyone else in the room. The bank's internal audit department started investigating unusual account access patterns last week. They're asking questions about information sharing between employees and customers' family members. The room went dead silent as the implications sank in. Frank's illegal access to my account wasn't just unethical, it was criminal fraud that could send him to prison. Worse yet, my parents' participation in the scheme made them accessories to federal banking crimes. "What does that mean for us?" Patricia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Frank sat down heavily on their couch, his head in his hands. It means I've been selling customer information to family members for 3 years, not just yours. I've got gambling debts that I couldn't pay any other way, and I thought nobody would notice if I helped relatives keep track of their family members' finances. But the bank's computer system logs every account access, and they found patterns they don't like. Derek stood up abruptly, his face pale with panic. Are you saying the house purchase could be reversed? That we might lose everything we just bought? I'm saying the FBI might get involved if they determine this was organized financial fraud, Frank replied grimly. And since you used stolen money for a major real estate transaction that could be considered money laundering on top of everything else. Amanda started crying, but not the happy tears from her pregnancy announcement. These were tears of terror, as she realized their perfect plan was collapsing around them. This can't be happening. Derek and I did everything legally. We didn't steal anything ourselves. I pulled out my phone and quietly activated the voice recording app, making sure to capture everything being said. Frank was confessing to criminal activity, and my parents were admitting their role in a fraud scheme that could land them all in federal prison. More importantly, Derek and Amanda were revealing their knowledge and participation in the conspiracy. The bank examiner wants to interview everyone involved in suspicious account activities. Frank continued, his voice shaking with fear. That includes any family members who received money transfers that couldn't be properly authorized by the account holders. You're going to have to explain how you accessed Bartholomew's savings without his written permission. Robert and Patricia exchanged terrified glances as they realized their harmless family assistance was actually multiple federal crimes. Banking fraud, identity theft, conspiracy, and possibly money laundering charges could destroy their retirement and send them to prison for years. But I was just getting started. My family had revealed their true characters, and now it was time for them to face the consequences of their choices. Derek paced around the living room like a caged animal, his earlier confidence completely evaporated. This is ridiculous. Bartholomew should be happy to help his family succeed. We're not criminals. We're just people trying to build a life together. Amanda wiped her tears and fixed me with a look of pure hatred. You know what, Derek's right. Bartholomew has always been selfish with his money, acting like he's better than us, because he went to college and got some fancy computer job. He owes this family for everything we invested in him growing up. The victim blaming was starting right on schedule. Instead of acknowledging their theft and fraud, they were attacking me for not voluntarily funding their lifestyle. I'd seen this pattern before in family arguments, where Amanda would deflect responsibility by making herself the injured party. You know what I think? Amanda continued, her voice rising with righteous indignation. I think Bartholomew planned this whole thing to make us look bad. He probably moved his money somewhere else, just to trick us into taking worthless funds. He's probably been plotting to humiliate his family for years. Derek nodded eagerly, seizing on any explanation that didn't make him a criminal. That makes total sense. Why else would he be so calm about losing all his savings? He must have hidden his real money somewhere else, which means he deliberately set us up to steal fake funds. The irony was delicious. They were accidentally describing exactly what I'd done, but framing it as evidence of my malicious character rather than their own greed and stupidity. My careful planning to protect myself was being portrayed as a cruel trick played on innocent family members. Patricia stood up with sudden determination, pointing her finger at me accusingly. Bartholomew Robert Chen, you tell us right now where you hid your real money. Your sister needs that house for her baby, and you have no right to play games with your family's future. The demand was so outrageous that I almost started laughing again. They'd committed multiple felonies to steal money they thought belonged to me, and now they were angry that I'd protected myself from their theft. In their twisted logic, my defensive measures made me the villain of this story. We raised you, fed you, clothed you, paid for your education, Robert added, joining his wife's attack. Everything you have today exists because we invested in your future. Now it's time for you to invest in Amanda's future the same way. Derek pulled out a manila folder from Amanda's purse, spreading handwritten documents across the coffee table. Actually, we've been calculating exactly how much Bartholomew owes this family for his upbringing and education. Amanda's been researching the costs involved. I leaned forward to examine their paperwork, genuinely curious about their mathematical justification for theft. The documents contained itemized lists of childhood expenses, education costs, and family support dating back to my birth 28 years ago. They'd calculated the cost of diapers, baby food clothing, school supplies, and even estimated the value of emotional support provided during difficult periods. According to our research, Amanda announced proudly, "Our parents invested approximately $250,000 in your development from birth through college graduation. That doesn't include the opportunity costs of their time and energy, which could easily add another $100,000 to the total." The spreadsheet was impressively detailed if completely insane. They'd assigned monetary values to birthday gifts, Christmas presents, family vacations, and even hugs during childhood disappointments. By their calculations, I owed my parents more money than most people earn in 5 years. Derek pointed to the bottom line figure with obvious satisfaction. "So even if you had $1 million in hidden accounts, you'd still owe this family $350,000 in unpaid family investment returns. Taking money for Amanda's house wasn't theft. It was partial payment on your outstanding family debt." Frank looked up from his depression long enough to stare at them in amazement. "You people are completely insane. You can't charge someone for the cost of raising them. That's what parents do, because they chose to have children." Amanda whirled on Frank with fury. "Shut up, you gambling addict. This is none of your business. You're the one who got us into legal trouble with your criminal banking activities. If you hadn't offered to help us access Bartholomew's accounts, we never would have gotten involved in your fraud scheme." The blame shifting was accelerating as everyone tried to avoid responsibility for their choices. Frank was a criminal who corrupted innocent family members. I was a selfish son who owed debts for being raised. Amanda was a victim who deserved family support for her reproductive choices. Derek was an innocent bystander caught up in family drama. But the most shocking moment came when Derek pulled out one final document from Amanda's folder. "Actually, we have legal grounds for claiming Bartholomew's financial support," he announced, spreading an official-looking paper across the table. Amanda found this agreement that Bartholomew signed 3 years ago, promising to provide family financial assistance when his income reached certain levels. I picked up the document and immediately recognized my forged signature at the bottom. Someone had created a fake contract obligating me to share my wealth with family members based on income thresholds and family needs assessments. The document looked professional, with legal language and official formatting, but the signature was obviously not mine. "This is completely fake," I said calmly, examining the obvious forgery. "I never signed any agreement to financially support family members. Someone created this document and forged my signature." Amanda's face turned bright red as she realized her forgery had been discovered. "You're lying. You signed that document during Christmas dinner 3 years ago. Everyone saw you do it." Robert and Patricia nodded eagerly, desperate to believe any story that justified their theft. "We remember that night," Patricia said weakly. "You were signing some paperwork about your new job, and Amanda said it included family support provisions." The willful self-deception was breathtaking. My parents were pretending to believe an obviously forged document because it gave them permission to steal my money. They were choosing comfortable lies over uncomfortable truths, enabling their daughter's criminal behavior rather than confronting their own moral failures. Derek stood up and moved closer to me, his voice taking on a threatening tone. "Legal document or not, you're going to help this family whether you like it or not. Amanda's pregnant with my child. Your parents need financial security in their retirement, and you're going to provide it. If you don't cooperate voluntarily, we'll find other ways to get what we deserve." The threats were escalating from emotional manipulation to physical intimidation. Derek was a big guy who obviously worked out regularly, and he was positioning himself to use physical force if necessary. But threatening someone while committing financial fraud seemed like poor strategic planning. And if you try to cause legal problems for this family, Amanda added venomously, I'll make sure everyone in our extended family knows what a selfish, greedy person you really are. Cousins, aunts, uncles, everyone will hear about how you tried to destroy your pregnant sister's future over money you don't even need. The reputation destruction threat revealed their backup plan. If they couldn't guilt me into compliance or intimidate me into silence, they would wage social warfare to turn our entire family against me. Amanda had probably already started spreading lies about my character, preparing the battlefield for maximum damage. I looked around the room at these 4 people who shared my DNA, but clearly didn't share my values. Frank was a gambling addict who sold customer information to pay his debts. Derek was a manipulative opportunist who targeted vulnerable families for financial exploitation. Amanda was a calculating thief who used pregnancy as leverage for criminal activity. And my parents were willfully blind enablers who chose comfortable delusions over moral integrity. It was time to stop playing defense and start revealing some uncomfortable truths about their beautiful plan. I stood up, slowly, pulled out my phone, and held it up so everyone could see the recording app that had been running for the past 45 minutes. Before we continue this conversation about family obligations and forged documents, I want everyone to know that I've been recording everything said in this room. The silence was immediate and complete. Frank went even paler, if that was possible. Derek stepped back from me like I'd just pulled out a weapon. Amanda's mouth fell open in shock. My parents just stared at the phone like it might explode. You recorded us without permission, Patricia whispered, as if that was somehow worse than stealing $87,000. I recorded people confessing to multiple felonies while they threatened and attempted to extort me. I replied calmly. And in Oregon, only one party needs to consent to recording conversations, which means everything you've said is completely legal evidence. I walked over to my parents' computer and opened my laptop bag, pulling out the device I'd brought specifically for this moment. But before we discuss legal consequences, let me show you something interesting about my financial situation. The laptop screen came alive, displaying my actual investment portfolio dashboard. Account balances, real estate holdings, business revenue streams, and cryptocurrency positions filled the monitor with numbers that made everyone in the room gasp audibly. This is my real financial picture, I announced, scrolling through pages of investment accounts and business records. 3 LLCs, generating approximately $15,000 monthly in consulting revenue. Investment accounts containing $437,000 in diversified portfolios. And 4 rental properties in Southeast Portland that generate $6,000 monthly passive income. Amanda sank into the couch like someone had punched her in the stomach. That's impossible. I've been tracking your account for 18 months. You only had $94,000 total. You were tracking my decoy account. I explained patiently, the one where I deposited money from failed cryptocurrency trades and investment losses. Everything you saw was actually documentation of my worst financial decisions, not my successful ones. Derek's face went through several different expressions as he processed the implications. Confusion, anger, fear, and finally a desperate calculation as he tried to figure out how to benefit from this new information. So you do have money to help your family, he said hopefully. Even more money than we thought. Amanda's house purchase was just a tiny fraction of your real wealth. I shook my head at his persistent greed. You're missing the point completely, Derek. The money you stole wasn't mine. It belonged to my business losses and bad investment decisions. You essentially robbed my financial failures, not my successes. Frank looked up from his misery with sudden interest. Wait, if that account contained worthless money, then the bank fraud investigation might not be as serious. Maybe we can argue that no real harm was done, since you didn't lose anything valuable. Actually, Frank, your problems just got much worse, I replied, pulling up another browser window. Because I've been documenting your illegal activities for 3 years, ever since you first confessed to selling customer information. I have recordings, photographs, and detailed records of every time you accessed my account illegally." The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees, as everyone realized I'd been playing a completely different game than they'd understood. This wasn't a spontaneous family crisis, where they'd accidentally gotten caught stealing money. This was a carefully orchestrated operation where I'd been gathering evidence against them for years. But more importantly, I continued, I contacted real estate attorney Jessica Morrison yesterday about the fraudulent house purchase. She's very interested in a case involving stolen money used for major real estate transactions. As if summoned by magic, the doorbell rang at exactly that moment. Robert went to answer it, returning with a woman in her 40s, wearing an expensive business suit, and carrying a leather briefcase that screamed serious legal trouble. "Good afternoon, everyone," Jessica Morrison announced, surveying the room with sharp eyes that missed nothing. "I'm here to discuss the illegal real estate transaction that occurred earlier this week using fraudulently obtained funds." Behind her came a man in his 50s, wearing a police badge and detective shield that made Amanda start crying again. Detective Thomas Wright looked like someone who'd spent 30 years dealing with financial crimes and had very little patience for people who thought family relationships exempted them from federal laws. "I'm investigating the banking fraud case involving unauthorized account access and information sales," Detective Wright announced, looking directly at Frank. "Mr. Frank Chen, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit banking fraud, identity theft, and violation of federal privacy laws." As Detective Wright read Frank his rights, Jessica Morrison spread her own documents across the coffee table. The house purchase, completed on Tuesday, was funded entirely with money stolen from accounts belonging to Bartholomew Chen through criminal fraud schemes. Under Oregon law, any real estate transaction funded with criminal proceeds can be voided immediately, with all associated costs and penalties charged to the perpetrators. Derek grabbed Amanda's hand like he was trying to physically hold on to their dreams. "But we didn't know the money was stolen. We thought it was a family gift. We're innocent victims of Frank's banking crimes." Detective Wright laughed grimly as he finished handcuffing Frank. "Mr. Derek Williams, we have recorded conversations from today where you explicitly acknowledged knowing about the fraudulent account access and planning the theft months in advance. You're not victims. You're co-conspirators in organized financial fraud." Amanda looked at me with pure hatred blazing in her eyes. "You set us up. You planned this whole thing to destroy your own family. What kind of monster records his own parents committing crimes? The kind of monster who protects himself from people who've been plotting to steal his money for 3 years. I replied quietly. "The kind of monster who documents criminal threats and extortion attempts. The kind of monster who refuses to enable family members who think pregnancy gives them the right to commit felonies." Jessica Morrison opened her briefcase and pulled out a thick stack of legal documents. "The house purchase will be reversed within 72 hours. Mr. and Mrs. Robert Chen will be liable for all real estate commissions, legal fees, inspection costs, and early mortgage cancellation penalties. Additionally, they'll face civil lawsuits for the recovery of stolen funds, plus damages and interest." Patricia started sobbing as the financial reality hit her. "We can't afford any of that. We used all our credit cards to pay for Amanda's wedding expenses. If we lose our house too, we'll be homeless. You should have considered those consequences before committing multiple felonies to fund your daughter's lifestyle." Detective Wright replied without sympathy. "Financial crimes have financial consequences, regardless of your family relationships or emotional justifications." Derek made one final desperate attempt to salvage something from the wreckage. "Look, Bartholomew, you've made your point. You're smarter than all of us, and you protected your money. But Amanda really is pregnant, and we really do need help starting our lives together. Can't we work something out as family?" I looked at Derek with genuine curiosity. "You mean, after recording, you threatened me, watching you attempt to use forged documents as legal evidence, and documenting your participation in criminal conspiracy, You want me to voluntarily give you money for Amanda's pregnancy. Family forgives family, Amanda said desperately. People make mistakes when they're scared about their future. We can start over and build better relationships if you'll just help us through this crisis. But Detective Wright was already pulling out additional handcuffs. Mr. Derek Williams and Ms. Amanda Chen, you're both under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, attempted extortion, and criminal use of forged documents. You have the right to remain silent, and I strongly suggest you exercise that right. As the detective led my sister and her fiancé toward the front door in handcuffs, Amanda turned back to scream at me one final time. I hope you're satisfied, Bartholomew. I hope destroying your family was worth protecting your precious money. You'll never have a relationship with your nephew, because you chose greed over love. The house fell silent except for my parents' quiet crying, as they realized their comfortable delusions were finally collapsing into harsh reality. Their golden daughter was going to jail, their retirement security was destroyed, and their relationship with me was permanently damaged by their own choices. But we weren't quite finished yet. Detective Wright returned after securing Amanda and Derek in his patrol car, his expression grim as he pulled out a thick folder containing what appeared to be extensive documentation. Mr. Bartholomew Chen, I need to inform you that this investigation extends far beyond your family's situation. He spread photographs and bank records across the coffee table, showing account access logs that revealed the scope of Frank's criminal activities. Your cousin has been selling customer information to family members for over 3 years, involving 47 different families and approximately 200 unauthorized account accesses. Jessica Morrison leaned forward to examine the documents, her legal mind clearly processing the implications. This represents a massive conspiracy involving identity theft, privacy violations, and fraud across multiple families. The bank is cooperating fully because they're facing potential federal charges for inadequate security protocols. My parents sat in stunned silence as they realized they weren't unique victims of Frank's corruption, but willing participants in an organized crime network that had been operating for years. Their special arrangement with Frank was actually part of a systematic fraud scheme that could result in federal prison sentences. The bank's internal investigation revealed that Frank was specifically targeting families with successful young adults. Detective Wright continued. He identified customers whose relatives might want to monitor their financial progress, then offered information selling services to anyone willing to pay his fees. Patricia looked up through her tears with dawning horror. How many other families did we help destroy by participating in Frank's scheme? 46 other families have been affected by account breaches that Frank conducted while working with relatives like yourselves, Jessica Morrison replied bluntly. Some lost much more money than Bartholomew's decoy account contained. Several families have been financially ruined because Frank's clients used stolen information to commit identity theft and major fraud. Robert buried his face in his hands as the full scope of their moral and legal culpability became clear. We thought we were just keeping track of our son's financial progress. We never intended to hurt other families or participate in organized crime. Detective Wright pulled out his notebook and pen, preparing to take formal statements. Intent doesn't matter under federal banking laws, Mr. Chen. You paid for unauthorized access to financial information, participated in planning fraudulent money transfers, and used stolen funds for major purchases. Those actions constitute multiple felonies, regardless of your emotional motivations. Just then, the front door opened, and several people walked in without knocking. I recognized my cousin Sarah, my Aunt Margaret, and my Uncle Paul, all of whom looked serious and determined, rather than surprised by the scene they'd walked into. We got your message, Bartholomew, Sarah announced, looking around at the legal documents and police presence. We've been waiting 3 years for this day to finally arrive. Aunt Margaret sat down across from my parents, with an expression of deep disappointment. Robert, Patricia, we tried to warn you that Amanda was manipulating you into destroying your relationship with Bartholomew. We tried to tell you that her financial demands would eventually lead to serious trouble. Uncle Paul nodded grimly at Detective Wright and Jessica Morrison before addressing me directly. Amanda contacted all of us 6 months ago, claiming that you were hiding money from your struggling parents and refusing to help pay for their medical expenses and home repairs. My stomach dropped as I realized Amanda's manipulation had extended far beyond our immediate family. She'd been conducting a campaign of character assassination designed to isolate me from our extended family while building support for her theft schemes. She told us you were making over $100,000 annually, but forcing your parents to live in poverty while you hoarded wealth selfishly. Sarah continued. She asked each of us to loan her money for your parents' supposed financial emergencies, claiming you'd refuse to help them with basic living expenses. Aunt Margaret pulled out her own folder of documents, spreading Amanda's communication records across the remaining space on the coffee table. We have text messages, emails, and recorded phone calls where Amanda attempted to manipulate us into providing financial support based on lies about your character and your parents' financial condition. The evidence was overwhelming. Amanda had been running a multi-family fraud operation using emotional manipulation and false information to extract money from relatives while simultaneously planning to steal my savings. She'd turned family loyalty into a weapon against multiple households. We refused to give her money because her stories didn't make sense, Uncle Paul explained. If you were really making that much money and refusing to help your parents, we would have heard about family conflict from other sources. But when we asked other relatives, nobody else had heard anything about financial problems. Detective Wright took notes rapidly as our family members provided additional evidence of Amanda's systematic deception. Ms. Amanda Chen appears to have been running sophisticated manipulation schemes across multiple family networks simultaneously. This suggests premeditation and criminal intent, rather than impulsive mistakes driven by pregnancy emotions. Jessica Morrison examined the text messages and emails with professional interest. These communications could support additional charges of attempted fraud conspiracy to commit identity theft and organized criminal activity. Amanda was clearly operating beyond simple family financial disputes. Sarah looked at me with genuine concern and apologetic regret. Bartholomew, we should have contacted you directly when Amanda started spreading those stories about your character. We should have realized she was lying and trying to turn family members against each other. Actually, you did exactly the right thing by refusing to give her money and investigating her claims. I replied honestly. Amanda was counting on family members reacting emotionally without verifying information. By staying skeptical and checking facts, you protected yourselves from becoming her victims. Aunt Margaret shook her head sadly as she looked at my parents. Robert Patricia Amanda has been manipulating you for years, using your love for her as permission to destroy your relationship with Bartholomew. She turned your parental instincts into weapons against your own financial security and legal safety. Uncle Paul stood up with obvious anger directed at my parents' willful blindness. We tried to tell you that Amanda's financial demands would escalate until she destroyed your family. We warned you that enabling her manipulation would eventually lead to criminal activity. But you chose to believe her lies, rather than face uncomfortable truths about your daughter's character. Detective Wright closed his notebook and stood up to address my parents directly. Mr. and Mrs. Chen, based on the evidence collected today and the scope of criminal activity involved, you're both under arrest for conspiracy to commit banking fraud, money laundering, and participation in organized financial crimes. As he read them, their rights, my parents finally seemed to understand that their choices had permanent consequences that extended far beyond family disappointment. They were facing federal charges that could result in years in prison, financial ruin that would destroy their retirement, and social disgrace that would follow them for the rest of their lives. But the most devastating realization was yet to come. 6 months later, I sat in my new downtown Portland condo, overlooking the Willamette River, reading updates about my family's legal situation in the local newspaper. The banking fraud case had made headlines because of its scope and the number of families affected by Frank's information selling network. Frank received a 2-year federal prison sentence and was ordered to pay restitution to all affected families. His gambling addiction had destroyed not just his own life, but dozens of families who trusted him with their financial privacy. The bank fired him immediately and implemented new security protocols to prevent similar fraud schemes. Amanda and Derek both pled guilty to reduced charges in exchange for cooperation with the federal investigation. Amanda received 18 months in prison, plus 3 years probation, while Derek received 12 months plus restitution payments. Their engagement ended the week after their arrests, when Derek's family learned about the criminal charges and financial liabilities. Most importantly, Amanda's pregnancy claim turned out to be another manipulation tactic. Medical examinations revealed no pregnancy, making her emotional leverage completely fabricated. She'd been willing to fake pregnancy to justify stealing money and manipulating family members, demonstrating a level of calculated deception that shocked even the prosecutors. My parents faced the harshest consequences because their age and financial situation made prison time particularly devastating. Robert received 15 months in federal prison, while Patricia received 12 months plus house arrest. They lost their house to pay legal fees and restitution, and their retirement savings were completely exhausted by the financial penalties. But perhaps the most significant consequence was the destruction of their relationship with Amanda. Prison gave them time to reflect on how their favoritism and enabling had created the monster who destroyed their family. They finally understood that their unconditional support for Amanda's manipulative behavior had made them accessories to her crimes against multiple families. The extended family members who'd refused Amanda's manipulation attempts reached out to express their support and apologize for not intervening sooner. Cousin Sarah started a successful graphic design business using a loan I provided at fair market terms. Aunt Margaret received financial assistance during Uncle Paul's medical treatment, which I offered voluntarily based on genuine need and mutual respect. These positive relationships taught me valuable lessons about the difference between manipulation and legitimate family support. When people ask for help, honestly explain their genuine needs clearly, and respect your decision, regardless of your response that creates foundation for healthy family relationships. When people spy on your finances, lie about their circumstances, and demand money as payment for family obligations, that creates foundation for criminal activity. Derek disappeared from our family's life, completely proving that his interest in Amanda was purely financial. He married someone else within 3 months of his release from prison, targeting another young woman whose family had significant assets. Detective Wright warned his new targets about Derek's history, preventing another family from experiencing our trauma. The most important lesson from this experience was learning to trust my instincts about people's character rather than their family relationships or emotional appeals. Amanda had been showing manipulative and entitled behavior for years, but family loyalty prevented me from acknowledging the warning signs. My parents had been displaying favoritism and poor judgment consistently, but I'd made excuses for them because they were family. Protecting myself with the decoy account wasn't paranoid or selfish. It was necessary self-preservation against people who viewed my success as their entitlement. Creating financial boundaries didn't make me a bad family member. It made me a responsible adult who refused to enable destructive behavior. The fake pregnancy, forged documents, and character assassination campaign revealed that Amanda was capable of sophisticated criminal planning disguised as family drama. Derek's immediate abandonment proved that opportunistic people target families specifically because family relationships create emotional vulnerability that can be exploited for financial gain. My parents' willingness to participate in fraud rather than confront Amanda's character demonstrated how parental love can become toxic when it enables criminal behavior. Their favoritism created a spoiled adult who believed she deserved other people's money, and their refusal to set boundaries eventually destroyed their own financial security. Today, I use my wealth to support genuine family needs through voluntary generosity based on mutual respect. I've learned that healthy family relationships require honesty, boundaries, and consequences for destructive behavior. Money doesn't buy family harmony, but it definitely reveals people's true characters when they think they can access it without permission. The courthouse proceedings taught me that criminal behavior has criminal consequences regardless of family relationships or emotional justifications. Federal judges don't care if you're stealing from family members rather than strangers. Bank fraud is bank fraud. Conspiracy is conspiracy. And manipulation is manipulation, regardless of shared DNA. Most importantly, I learned that sometimes the greatest gift you can give manipulative people is the natural consequences of their own actions. Enabling their behavior by accepting theft lies and threats only encourages escalation toward more serious crimes. Allowing them to face legal consequences for criminal choices creates opportunity for genuine remorse and character growth. My relationship with my parents will probably never fully recover, but it's now based on honesty rather than manipulation. They understand that I protected myself because I recognized their character flaws, not because I was selfish or ungrateful. They're learning to rebuild their lives based on their own choices rather than expecting me to fund their retirement. Amanda will have years to reflect on how her greed and manipulation destroyed her family relationships and criminal record. Perhaps prison will provide the consequences she never received during childhood, teaching her that other people's money isn't available for her convenience, and that pregnancy lies have serious legal implications. The experience taught me that family loyalty should be earned through consistent character and respect, not demanded through guilt and manipulation. True family members celebrate your success rather than plotting to steal it. They ask for help honestly rather than spying on your finances. They respect your boundaries rather than threatening you when you protect yourself. Building new relationships based on these principles has created genuine connections with people who appreciate voluntary generosity rather than demanding entitled access to my resources. These healthy relationships remind me that family isn't just about shared genetics. It's about shared values and mutual respect. If you've ever experienced family members who treated your success as their entitlement, remember that protecting yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. If relatives are monitoring your finances without permission, planning to take your money without consent, or demanding payment for childhood expenses, those are warning signs of manipulation rather than healthy family relationships. Have you ever had to protect yourself from family members who felt entitled to your financial success? What boundaries did you establish to maintain healthy relationships while preventing manipulation? Please share your experiences in the comments below, and remember to like this video if it helped you understand the difference between family support and family exploitation. Subscribe for more stories about protecting yourself from manipulation, and share this video with anyone who might be experiencing similar family financial pressure. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it helps you recognize the importance of maintaining boundaries, even with people you love. May you always have the wisdom to distinguish between genuine need and calculated manipulation, and the courage to protect yourself when family relationships become weapons for financial exploitation.